If you're interested in watching the debates, I have a few things for you to keep in mind, especially if this is your first time, if you're new to politics, this is your first time voting. I've been voting since I was 18 also, and more recently gotten a little more into politics. Maybe it's just the old person thing to do, and as I grow older I get a little more involved. But either way, I'm here to try to break it down into simpler terms, things I wish somebody would have told me. I've been a school teacher since 2009. I want to help you make educated choices so you have better results and live a more peaceful life. Sal with Omni-Versal and the Omni-Versity, teaching you things you didn't learn in school. Life's going to teach you lessons. Might as well try to learn from those lessons before they teach you something you didn't want to learn. Let's start kind of a little bit of self-reflection as to what this should mean to you, and meaning that what are some of the things important in your life. Hey, now it would be better if you kind of write it down, just kind of get a rough edit or a rough draft as to what you think is important to you, and just type it on your phone or whatever. The visual sometimes really helps. So think of things that are really important to you. And what would you like to have changed in your personal life over the next 4 years? Okay. Now, as you kind of reflect on that, I think it's important to set this beforehand, because after the fact, you'll hear from media and headlines and social media and so on that if you didn't think about it beforehand, the way I see media now, it almost seems like they're telling you what should be important to you. So the reason you kind of think of it first is so you already know, and you're not as easily influenced by like, oh yeah, that sounds right. Like I should be more focused on that, and maybe it's not that it's not important, but it might not be. Sorry, got a message there on my phone, and it shouldn't be that. Maybe it's not that important to you. And again, this is just part of the politics game and part of memes and stuff that make you feel like, oh, it's not important to you, but it's part of politics. So try to figure out what's important to you, and then as you're watching the candidates, what seems to be which candidate seems most likely to have the biggest impact on the topics that are important to you. If it's just one topic or the top three or whatever, but which one do you think after, or as you're listening to them, which one do you think has a greater potential of having an impact on that? Okay. Now the other thing is being aware of our biases, which means which side do you naturally tend to favor? Okay, and I know right now I'm not a Trump supporter, but if we're going to be under this person's leadership for the next 4 years, I want to get some silver linings and see what things he could do, and just try to see a little bit more of the actual potential rather than just the media telling me what I should be looking out for, or taking things and spinning them in a different way. And I think just recently I've come to this realization that maybe things aren't the way they are, especially on social media and other media sources. Okay, so keep that in mind. So some of the key topics are probably going to be talking about is inflation. Inflation seems to have been a big one for these next 4 years. Prices of things have gone up a lot, but yet our pay hasn't gone up. So maybe this is a big topic for you, and listen to how the candidates talk about it and see if they have reasonable solutions. Okay, and we'll get into that a little more, because these are kind of questions that would fall under most of the categories. But that was the first category. Other one is healthcare. Okay, people seem to be getting sicker sooner, longer, and it's also more expensive. So there's another price thing. Immigration seems to be a big one. We're in El Paso, Texas, and so we live on a border, and that was kind of a big one here. But I do think the media dramatized some of it, but then there's other parts that weren't shown also. So again, it's not the full story. So just keep things like that in mind. Next thing is war. War is a big one. Whatever's going on in Israel and Palestine and Ukraine and Russia, these could potentially have big impacts on us, even though they're so far away. It's probably not even on your radar right now, but maybe it's something that could happen in the next 4 years. Like maybe we didn't even predict these within the 4 years, so how are we... You understand what I mean? So maybe something in the next 4 years could be also drastically different. Abortion and reproductive rights is a big one to keep in mind, especially with a reversal of Roe v. Wade and so on and so on. The next one is gun control, especially after the shooting in Georgia. So these are all still big topics that are feel like there's been no solution, and so maybe something else different will be said this time that'll make you think differently. Censorship seems to be another big one, and this coming from both sides, but I think both sides interpret it a little bit differently. The Democratic Party seems to have their own type of censorship, whereas Republicans also seem to have their own type of censorship. Republicans censorship in like banning books and things like that. My interpretation of all this is a little bit of, they're still censoring ideas that I think that people realize how intrusive and how powerful ideas can be. And so when you think of something, when an idea is pushed a certain way, they see the long-term effects, and so they try to stop it, essentially, instead of, I think, just talking about it and seeing why it could be beneficial or not beneficial, and this way you don't have to censor it. But that's my personal take. Okay, and the next bigger one is democracy. Both seem to be threatened by the other's sense of democracy, and if we will have democracy any longer after this election, and so on and so on. And so again, this is very different from both sides, and I've just recently been made aware of how different they are. So first, with the Republicans, with Donald Trump, it seems that most people are afraid that he's not going to give up power, as we had the insurrection and everything, and so he didn't seem to be willingly to give up power and wanted to stay in control. So that's, I think, the Democrats' view of the loss of democracy under Donald Trump. The other view as the loss of democracy from the Republicans is in the sense that the Democratic Party didn't seem to have a very democratic process for Kamala Harris. Okay, they had Joe Biden, which apparently did go through some primaries, which I also was unaware of. I remember thinking, I was looking forward to seeing candidates again and seeing who else could have run against Joe Biden. My understanding was that usually out of like tradition, which I typically, I'm not a big fan of tradition just for the sake of tradition, but for the sake of tradition, the incumbent doesn't really get much of a challenger. So it's almost just implied that he's going to be the next representation. That's fine. I wasn't sure if he was going to be running again, especially considering his age, how old he was, if he had another 4 years in him. So that's why I thought there would be other candidates, at least to kind of give us options. And since part of that loss of democracy that the Republicans see is that he almost didn't willingly step down, he was kind of forced out. And it still was kind of his choice. Like, I'm sure he could have said no, and maybe we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but this is kind of the mentality where it's coming from. He was essentially pushed out, and then now Kamala Harris was put in his place. I don't understand if it's because she's the vice president, that would be the natural chain of command, but the argument is that she didn't earn her own votes. So that's where that that sense of loss of democracy is coming from. Okay. All right. So as you start watching these debates, one of the most fascinating things to me is, and you'll see for yourself if you're going to watch, is did they answer the question? A lot of times politicians tend to just ramble on things that sound related to the topic, but a lot of times they don't actually answer the question. And even this last debate with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, the mediators did a really good job at bringing them back. Sometimes they would say they'd have 2 minutes to answer the question. They said, you have 40 seconds left. And then they repeat the question to see, essentially because they didn't answer the question, see if they would actually give an answer to the question. So that's one of the biggest things I want you to watch out for. Did the candidate answer the question? Now, as if they are answering the question, does it sound like a solution that is attainable or achievable? Is this something that sounds probable, or is it just something far-fetched that sounds good to make you feel a certain way and then get your vote that way? And this can kind of go both ways. It can either make you feel real good about something with no substantial solution, or not a probable solution, nothing that is likely to happen, or the other way around. They can give a solution that can be step by step and so on, but to layman's terms, it sounds very almost unappealing, but almost because we're so far removed from it, I don't understand it, but I kind of think, I kind of believe that you know what you're talking about. And so it doesn't make you feel as good as the other one. And so those are kind of some things that you kind of got to take into account when you're listening to the answers. Hey, this is all part of rhetoric. It's just an effective art of persuasive communication. Okay, sometimes they just use feelings, try to make you feel good, and or use a lot of facts and numbers and so on, and so they make you think oh, this person knows what he's talking about because they're pulling up a bunch of numbers that I'm not really sure of, but I'll take their word for it. Okay, and eventually that last part is trust. They try to make you trust them to see if this is they'll try to make you trust them so that you'll just take their word for it, if that makes any sense. Okay, and so those are pretty much the top things I would look out for in the debates. Did they answer the question? Does it sound like a probable solution? Or is it rhetoric? Are they just making me feel things and telling me things just to get my vote? Afterwards, I suggest a little bit of fact checking. Okay, do some of your own research. Some of the things they said, look them up. One of the biggest ones is, especially when it's been flip-flopped administration. So these past 4 years has been under a Democratic president, and then the previous was under a Republican president. And so part of that game is that they always try to take credit for each other's, because kind of it takes time for the things to take into effect. So if the Republican president 8 years ago did put policies into place, it feels like it takes time for these things to kick in, and then they take credit for it in those 4 years. And then while those people are in those 4 years, they try to take credit because it's happened during our 4 years. And so I honestly have no answer for that. I sometimes don't even know what to believe with it, but I think it's a good thing to keep in mind that maybe neither of them are telling the truth, or maybe they're both telling the truth, but just kind of take it with a grain of salt. All right. Aside from that, I hope this was useful. I didn't get taught politics this way, and I think it's a little more useful as to kind of experience it. I always think experience is the best teacher. So just sit with it, listen, take it in, almost taking it as a spectator, as if you really don't have anything at stake, even though we do. But it's a little easier to take it in that way. All right. Another thing they might talk about is the electoral college, which is how the president is officially elected, and I made a video about that too. If you would like to know how the electoral college works, if you'd like to check it out, explains it in much simpler terms that are a little more understandable. All right, bye.